When Antonella was just 14 years old, she had the most terrifying encounter of her life. When a group of terrible guys tried to kidnap her, they believed they would be able to escape consequences for their heinous crime. But they weren't prepared for who would come to her rescue. You'll be completely shocked to learn who the girl's rescuers are. Keep watching to find out how this unlikely saviors saved the life of Antonella. The beautiful Italian city of Cosenza serves as the backdrop for the story of 14-year-old Antonella, an independent and strong-willed young lady. Sadly, she had lost both her parents in a tragic vehicular accident at an early age, so her grandmother adopted her, having already raised 3 daughters. Despite the trauma of losing her parents, Antonella managed to keep going and even adapt to her new life with surprising resilience. Her grandmother was relentless in ensuring that Antonella got the best possible care and upbringing despite their difficult situation. She made sure that all needs were met, be it physical, emotional, or mental, and worked hard to create a loving and secure home environment for her granddaughter. Antonella was always a respectful, modest, and quiet young girl who was developing into a warm, lovely young woman with a nice heart. Antonella lived in a rather quiet neighborhood, but everyone there was kind, and the community was quite tight-knit. The city was encircled by lush trees, which gave the entire area a wonderfully natural appearance. Despite the forest beauty, Cosenza's residents made an effort to avoid it because it was home to several wild, violent, and dangerous animals. All city kids, including Antonella, were warned not to go exploring in the wilderness since there were reports of individuals going into the forest and never coming back. The forest, though, drew Antonella for some reason. Her uncle had even built her a tree house in the outskirts of the city where she had a beautiful view deep into the forest because she loved to sit there and observe the wildlife. She was constantly being warned by her grandmother about the perils of the forest, and she was always concerned that one day her granddaughter might go too far into the trees. However, Antonella was wise and avoided upsetting her grandmother. On one occasion, Antonella made the decision to take a path that skirted the border of the city where it met the forest on her way home from school. Although the road was empty and peaceful, Antonella liked the quiet surroundings and observed the squirrels playing and skipping in the trees. But suddenly, from not too far into the forest, a loud and spine-tingling howl could be heard. She immediately recognized it as the howl of a wolf and bolted as quickly as she could for the security of her house. But she was stopped by some sort of fascination or curiosity. The howl didn't sound very frightening, so Antonella began to fear that an animal might be hurt or in danger. She might be able to solve the puzzle and possibly assist the animal if she ventured only a short distance into the forest. After taking a few timid steps into the trees, she caught the sight of an animal laying on the ground in a clearing in the distance. When Antonella realized it was a wolf as she got closer, her blood froze. She was aware that wolves could be dangerous and vicious, and that they could easily kill her if they so wished. But something caught her eye that prevented her from returning: the wolf pups. They gathered around their mother, who had clearly been in a fight. She had obvious wounds on her body from fighting another larger animal while protecting her children, and it appeared that the wolf mother would die horribly. The mother gradually stopped breathing, leaving the cubs alone and terrified. Seeing that she didn't want to leave those cubs alone, as they might get attacked by the same animal, which is the reason for their mother's death, Antonella approached her slowly. Much to her relief, the cubs did not appear to be scared. Maybe they knew she wasn't going to hurt them. She took a small amount of food from her bag and tossed it to the cubs to eat. They jolted after the food, delighted in what the generous stranger had provided. Antonella went over to the dead wolf's head to make a silent vow to protect her cubs, promising to bring them food as frequently as she could. Antonella, on the other hand, was unable to bring the cubs home with her. They would not only be out of their natural habitat, but Antonella's grandmother would be aware that she had disobeyed her orders. If her grandma knew this, she would lose trust and faith in Antonella, which she is not intending to happen. She was still concerned that the cubs would die horribly if their mother didn't intervene. Antonella devised a plan in which she would take them back to her treehouse and keep them there. They'd be safe there, and she'd be able to look after them easily. Antonella called them Romulus and Remus. So she took the cubs back to the treehouse and spent the evening playing with them. They were cheerful and energetic, and loved her company. After that, she would go home and bring them food. They had actually become Antonella's best buddies. Antonella did this every day as she watched the wolf cubs grow stronger and bigger. Antonella considered the beautiful animals to be her friends after this went on for months. Despite what she had been taught, the wolves were sociable and friendly. They enjoyed Antonella's company and began to behave more like dogs than wolves. When they saw her approaching, their tails would wag, and they would yap and roll around on the floor after she had fed them their favorite meals. It was truly a match made in heaven. One day, while she was heading to the treehouse, Antonella instantly became alert that some men were following her. As she walked faster, the men began to run, and Antonella was sprinting away from them. The men caught up with Antonella just before she reached her treehouse, indicating that they had bad intentions. They threatened her with a knife before dragging her into the forest to carry out their evil and insidious plan. The men led her deep into the woods and threw her to the ground. The young woman was on her knees in front of them and scared to death. Antonella couldn't help but fear the worst, and tears welled up in her eyes as she wondered what would become of her and if she would ever see her grandmother or her home ever again. A distant howl rang through the forest before the men could do anything. It halted the men in their tracks, and they looked at each other, exhausted and panicked. Antonella, on the other hand, felt a surge of confidence and a glimmer of hope because she recognized those howls. She knew what that noise meant. The men waited a few moments, wondering if the noise would repeat itself. But there was none. They returned their attention to the girl on the ground and began to approach her with an evil expression on their faces. But then there was a loud wrestling, and out of the foliage pounced on two wolves, Romulus and Remus. They positioned themselves between Antonella and her attackers and bared their teeth violently, growling at them and swiping their paws at the men. When the two wolves saw Antonella being snatched from the window of their treehouse, they broke out and tracked their master and her captors into the forest, leaping into action to defend the one who had looked after them since they were pups. Antonella had never felt safer than she did that moment. The attackers, on the other hand, were clearly terrified and fled in various directions. The wolves chased them down, snapping at their heels and snarling at them as they ran. The men would never even consider attempting such a heinous act again in their lives, let alone come close to approaching the forest. After the attackers were out of sight, the wolves returned to Antonella, who was shaken and upset, but otherwise fine. They nuzzled her and sat in her lap until she was strong enough to pick herself up and walk out of the forest and back home. And the two wolves remained by her side, protecting her and looking out for her, just as Antonella had done for them when their mother died. She took them, fed them, and nurtured them. Antonella's story is a heartwarming example of how the relationships we have with animals can be so much more than just superficial. It goes to show that, given the chance, any animal has the capacity to exhibit loyalty, compassion, and bravery. We hope her story inspires you to think about the role animals play in your own life and appreciate them for all that they are. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories like Antonella's.